Let's give a warm welcome to Jon Chu. Kevin Tsujihara, CEO and Chairman of Warner Bros.
It's nice to be home. I used to sit right in the back over there. We didn't have laptop people, we wrote things down in those days.
Oh, it's so exciting to have this film coming out and know that two Trojans are behind the production of this fantastic movie. I think we should really start with the source. I mean, the book was a sensation. Tell us a little bit about how that turned into a script and how it wound up coming to you, Jon, and eventually finding its way to Warner Bros.
Yeah, I came on after there was a draft of a script. So Nina Jacobson, Brad Simpson, and John Pennati got the rights to the book originally, and they developed it with Pete Corelli, who did the proposal, and had a draft. So I had read the book. I was looking for something that was more personal to me, something that scared me as a filmmaker. I'd been around for a little bit, so I wanted something to really sort of to see if I was an actual artist and not just work for hire. And so I wanted to do the thing that scared me the most, which was deal with my cultural identity, and that's like literally the scariest thing. I did a short here once about it, and I never showed anybody because I was such a sensitive issue in my brain, and I didn't want to get it wrong.
What was it about?
It was about an Asian American boy who had these musical visions. It's a really weird one. These like barbershop quartet visions, and of sort of standing up to bullies who were sort of picking on him. And it was great. I mean, it was a great experience, but it was painful for me. I can't, even now, hard to watch. So picking something like Crazy Rich Asians, which was a popular book already, was also very scary, but I knew I had to do it. And when I read the script, I knew it wasn't the best script yet. I knew that there was a specificity about being Asian that it didn't tap onto yet. It was very much a romantic comedy, and I knew I wanted more from that. So I brought in Adele Lim, who's a writer that I had just worked with. She's a Malaysian American writer, and we worked on it for like 6 months outside of the studio system. Wasn't sure if any studio would even want something like this. And when we got it to a place we loved, we approached a bunch of different studios, and of course, Kevin led Warner Brothers, was the most open to it and the one that wanted to do it and saw the potential in it. And I have to say publicly that he does not get enough credit for that. Like this it is not a coincidence of all the change that Warner Brothers has been making over the years, and that he is the head of that. It is to trust us to spend money on casting, more casting directors, more time, to understand that that process needed to be done because the system had not provided a forum for Asian actors to be seen because there are no parts for that, is because him leading the way to make that happen. So.
At least 2 decades, right, since the Joy Club had come out. So tell us from your perspective, sort of, what was it about this moment, and what was it about your own personal desire to tell these stories that sort of allowed your two paths to converge?
I think it was nice of you to say that, but the fact of the matter is...
Can I direct a DC movie?
Okay. So, I love this thing. So, I came here, and when I was here, there wasn't even this building. I'm a few years before you. Black hair. But by the time the movie got to me, and we came to the green light committee, or it came for green light, we'd read the script. We knew the book. The book was obviously very well received. The script was fantastic. The challenge for us was, it was hard. You know, you look at those numbers, and it's hard to comp because people will say, well, the best comp is the Joy Luck Club 25 years ago. And we saw it as something more like, the comp was more like Sex and the City. That the story transcended the fact that it was a story of Asians. And you know, I think the one thing that Jon did an amazing job of, if you're not hungry and want to go to Singapore after seeing that movie, those were also part of the cast that he created in this movie. But we looked at it as something like that. And for somebody like myself, it's hard because I don't want to impose my will on the process. But in this particular case, there were a number of executives, Courtney Valenti, Greg Silverman, Chantal. Everybody loved the movie and wanted to work with you. And so it was a huge opportunity. It was a relief for me because the last thing you want to do is force your way through things because they never work when you do that. I've found in the things that we do. And so in this particular case, there was a groundswell of support to take a risk on a movie that the hardest movies to make from a studio perspective are movies that are in this mid-range. Romantic comedies are almost not being made right now by studios. And so I'm really proud of the fact that two of the movies that were the hardest to make out of the slate this year, this movie with this incredibly talented director, and Bradley Cooper's movie, A Star is Born, which was very difficult to make, first-time director, that turned out incredible. And the fact that these movies are out there, they're unique, they have a voice, and for us to be able to do this with an all-Asian cast, with an incredible director like Jon, a German director like Jon, it's just, it was irresistible for us to pass up. But I knew it was a competitive situation. It wasn't just us.
Right. Well, let's talk about that because obviously Netflix was at the table too. So tell us a little bit about trying to find the right place to get this made and what the considerations were that really made Warner Brothers something special for this project.
Well, one, your business affairs department is very good at what they do. They gave us 20 minutes to answer, and so we got all the all the final offers in, and of course Netflix, who has eyeballs all across the world, that could show it to them in a second, and opening numbers didn't matter, how many people saw it, we didn't have to deal with reviews. That's a very attractive thing for an artist, not to have to deal with that stuff. But I'll tell you what, in my opinion, the power of cinema is still in existence. It's something that I think people still try to poo-poo, but look at how our movie has caught fire in popular culture right now. If we were on Netflix, it would not have this fervor. There is an event to it, and I think that the sign is that Asian leads in an all-Asian cast is worth leaving your house, gathering your friends and family, which takes a lot of time, getting that babysitter, fighting traffic, getting parking, standing in line for food, getting into a room, turning off the lights, turning off your phone and saying, tell me a story. That is value, more value, and by a big studio, a conglomerate that owns a studio, to say, we're going to bet on this and throw even more tens of millions of dollars for marketing to get people, to convince people to go watch this. This is worth your time and energy. These people and their story are worth that time and energy. And to me, that was the big message of all of this. We knew, we had confidence we could make a great movie, but how it delivers to the audience, it's a message that spills into all media, in all walks of life, and it affects the kid at high school who looks at himself or how other kids look at him or her. To me, that was, and I give a lot of credit to our producers, because technically, I didn't actually have the power to say we're going one way or the other. When they were asked which way do we want to go, they said, this means more to Jon and Kevin. This is their story, so we defer to them. There's a lot of money on the line personally for all of us, and we chose Warner's because we knew that there was no guarantee of how many theaters, no guarantee of how much marketing dollars, but I trusted the people there, the executives there, who I met, and I could see in their eyes that they understood what the story is about, so that's what we went.
We wanted to make the movie, and I think that was one thing that we committed to you guys. That wasn't going to be something that we're going to put in development and develop. And I think that one of the things that resonates with me is the power of cinema. Warner Brothers is the biggest television producer in the world. We produced almost 100 series right now for networks and streaming sites. But the cultural phenomenon and the statement that this movie makes is very difficult to kind of create in a television environment. It's been done, but it's very, very rare. And I think that the fact that you experience this in this way, it's really hard to do any other way than the way it was done. And we wouldn't be sitting here talking about this movie if this guy wouldn't have done an amazing job. He really did something that's quite special in taking what is a great story that's very relatable for all of us. I mean, we all have issues with, I had issues with my mother-in-law, and believe it or not, but we have those, everybody has these feelings that they've experienced in their life. It's very relatable.
Well, I want to go back to talking about making the film from the adaptation on, but since we just touched on it, and the film just opened tonight, I really feel like this film is the most anticipated film since like Infinity War. Like everything else that came out in the summer, like has been building to this moment, and I don't know if it's just because I was so excited to see it, or if it felt like as the summer grew, this film became kind of like the climax of the summer. The really something important, something fun, something we haven't seen before. And I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about the market, sort of discovering how incredibly wide the appeal of this movie was going to be. If that it all surprised you guys from when you first started making it to now, where it's opening and it's doing very well and it's getting great reviews. How did that evolve?
From my perspective, we were done with the movie, or pretty close to done with the movie last November, and I remember we were doing test screenings, and so we'd go and you get a company and they recruit an audience to come see it for free so you can do a test. The amount of people to say yes to a free movie was so low, it was 20 to 1. With any movie, that is an extremely low number. The Caucasian people thought it was a movie that was not for them. The Asian people who had not read the book thought that the title was offensive, and the Asian people who had read the book was very skeptical of Hollywood and were very so unwanting to see it. So it was we knew we had this giant wall in front of us, and again, credit to the marketing team. It did not faze them. They said, okay, we don't have there's not a giant star in this to sell around. The book is big, but in book numbers, but not in movie numbers. So how do we show this? And what we found was when we showed it in the test screening, basically begging people to just come watch it, they came out in all ages, all ethnicities, enjoyed it at the highest levels. We scored really well, and they all enjoyed it. It was very, very equal. Surprisingly, men and women also enjoyed it at the same levels. And so the strategy that was told to me, and again, I was just hearing these things from the marketing team, was the movie is the best commercial. It's hard to describe what this movie looks like, feels like, unless you watch the movie. And so they had this bold strategy of saying, let's just show it to as many people as possible. And let's start with our core. Let's start with all the organizations. John, who have you been in touch with in Hollywood, the Asian sort of groups and supporters? Let's start there. Let's show them and let's have them build it. And so we did. And Warner's has this great multicultural part of their marketing team that actually will listen to me. The amount of emails I get from people wanting to support my movies, but I don't know where to send them. I could send them to Tara Potts over there. And then we had dinners with these people, and we said, bring your people, you have 10 people in your group, 5 people in your group, let's screen it for them. And this thing just kept building over the last 5-6 months you could feel people owning it and just getting swag to give out to their clubs and their groups. And it just started spreading beyond those groups. And to witness that, and I had a front row seat to that, it was a master class in marketing. I had never seen anything like that, culminating in the last 2 weeks, where it suddenly hit mainstream media and people wanted to cover it beyond, and could see the potential that was. I've never seen it like that before.
Yeah, the ratio was actually 21 to 1.
It had a one out for me.
That means we had to ask 21 people before we could find one person to watch a free movie. That is, to give you kind of a sense of the difference of what that is. We tested a movie last Thursday. Did we have press in there? Nope. So we tested Fantastic Beasts 2, and it was, the ratio was 3 to 1. And that gives you a sense of the kind of challenge that we had. But in this particular case, as John said, the movie tested outstanding. I mean, it was unbelievably good. And so we knew we had the goods. And so as John said, the best marketing tool that we had was not to create a 60-second spot, a 90-second spot, a 30-second spot. The best spot was people actually seeing the movie and then their social response. And so, as John said, we focused on, very early though, going out to the core group and then broadening out. Because the movie played, as John said, once we got people in, we saw that it played for all races and all ethnicities and all gender. And so that was the whole strategy. And in this particular case, John himself and the movie were the best ambassadors. And so it was really kind of a great experience for us. And you can only do it when you have a great movie. If the movie doesn't play, you hide it. And you blitz the market with 30-second, 60-second spots.
That's the strategy. But when I heard them give me the strategy, I was like, oh, you want us to do it, basically? I did not believe it. I was like, that sounds lazy to me. But it worked.
Let's go back to the adaptation of the book, because obviously there's going to be a lot of expectations, how it's, how the story's adapted. There obviously are some changes in the third act. In many ways, the film is a lot kinder to Eleanor than the book is. So tell us a little bit about some of the major decisions that you made. I'm sure Michelle Yeoh had some things to say about that character. Give us a sense of what the adaptation process was and where it was at when you first got the script versus what we just watched.
So when I knew we wanted Michelle Yeoh from the very beginning, and so I reached out to her and we had a very fast conversation. She said, if you want me to play the villain, I won't be in this movie. She said, I read the book, and Eleanor is very mustache twirly in it. She described it, and she said, I won't be that. I have to defend my culture and our beliefs in a way that I can go home, because I can't go home if I just make it as that I'm the bad guy. She said, you defend the American culture, the American side of it your way, and that will be a great, it'll just add things for the audience to decide. So I thought that was one, really smart, and that's another thing that people talk about. When you hire great actors, they bring you great notes. They bring you the sophistication that makes your movie better. They push you to make your movie better. So that was one thing, and so we tracked her. And once you get someone like Michelle Yeoh and Constance Wu, you realize that's your movie. These two women coming head to head, both super strong in their own cultures. And that mahjong scene, which is not in the book, we knew that was going to be the most important scene, where these two are going to face each other, and there wasn't going to be a fight. There wasn't going to be running around everywhere. They were just looking at each other, playing mahjong. And I always loved. We did many drafts of that last scene with them, and I remember Michelle saying, hey, I don't like this new draft because I would never let this little girl speak to me like this. I would just get her out of this table. So she was like, I want to say these things. And she wrote down what she wanted to say. So we did a draft with that. And then Constance read that and she was like, I would never let this woman She's like, I need to say that one from draft 2. So I'm like, okay, why don't you say that monologue and then we'll let her say that monologue. And then the day of, I don't think they even spoke to each other. They just sat down and they went at it. And it was, I made my job real easy. The camera was just sitting there. The hardest part was doing the mahjong, because it was literally like a choreographed dance. We had to hire a mahjong expert, a gambling addict, I guess, and to teach the moves that would happen. And a game that fast is almost impossible anyway, so we had to figure out how to do it properly in that. And the sound of it, this rhythm, wanted it to be like, I think there's like a fight on the ceiling, on the rooftops of Crouching Tiger with bamboo sticks, like doing that. And so we wanted the sound of the mahjong tiles to be that sound, just pounding away. And then the moment where, and we also wanted to make sure Rachel Chu, this is her journey. This is not about her and the guy. It's not about her getting the guy. This was her victory. She should be able to walk away from that scene, and the movie should be able to end and us feel very satisfied. So we made sure that it led up to this moment. And then when she walks away, adding her mother there, looking back at Eleanor, was this, I don't know, it just made it a much more layered idea, this timeless battle of class between these two women. It was almost like the Joker and the Batman look, and they have kids that are in love all of a sudden. And they look at each other, and then the way she grabs Rachel, she like tugs her in. That's exactly the way my mom like grabs us as kids. I was the youngest of 5, and that to me was so Asian motherly, that, and I didn't tell her to do that, and I love that moment. I think that was very strong. So that all came together into the pieces.
Talk about the rest of the cast too, because there's some people that have a lot of exposure, and there's a lot of people that I think we're seeing relatively for the first time, and I think that's a fantastic mix. And I'm curious to know a little bit about the process, especially also the difference between looking at Asian American, but Asian with the British background is also sort of unique to see on screen. So tell us about how you guys collaborated on that process.
Well, I didn't collaborate, he did.
Well, the studio has to approve things, right?
That Joker Batman thing kind of scares me.
So over the years, I've been sort of collecting names of people that I love out there. Ronnie Chang, when he did this, he was on The Daily Show, he did this report on Chinatown during which was a response to a Fox News Waters World thing that they did. And his response is so freaking awesome. I literally stood up in my living room. I love this guy. I'm going to put him in something. So I wrote his name down. And then Jimmy O Yang singing in Patriots Day and Silicon Valley. Such a wide, talented dude, and so I wrote his name. Constance Wu, of course, and Michelle, obviously. Aquafina was from Warner Bros. Themselves. They said, "Hey, you got to look at this girl," and I had remembered her from YouTube, her YouTube videos. And so we wrote all these names. It was like the Avengers of Asian actors. A lot of them are in my pitch, actually, my initial pitch. I just didn't know if they were going to be available. But one of the best things about being the first in town to do this is you get pick of the litter. You get the best. And these were people who were beginners. They've been working for years. They have gone through the ups and downs already. They should have been in movies already. So to have them together and present it in this powerful, almost force coming through the screen, it feels like, because a lot of people have not seen them before, and together even more powerful. Where have they been? What have we been missing? And I think that idea that they are as funny, as smart, as fierce, as dramatic, as hero, and as much as a villain as any actor that can be on that screen and worth your money. That's the power of this movie, and being the first to be able to do that.
I think Henry's story is great. Go ahead. Henry's story.
Yeah,
I think he's going to be somebody that we're going to be talking about for a long time.
Well, Henry is a whole nother thing. We looked for Nick Young in the book. Is very specific. He has this very specific British accent, and he has this ease about him, effortless charm. And so we went on a search all around the world. We had casting directors in every continent, and we had YouTube auditions as well. All my cousins and people were sending me videos of friends that they thought were really good looking. My Google searches became very interesting after a while. It was like 2 weeks before we were going to fly to Beijing. There was a couple actors there that we were looking at, and a couple actors here. So we were going to have Constance read with some here and read with some in Beijing. And our line producer were just setting up our office in Malaysia. The accountant there, Lisa Kim, mentioned that 5 years ago, she watched this award show and saw this guy, and all her assistants were obsessed with him. We found out later she didn't have assistants, so I get that email. I'm like, yeah, maybe for another part, we'll see. And then I look him up on Instagram like a couple days later, and I start watching he did travel shows. He was a host, so all these travel shows. He is so likable. He was cooking with people, loving people, and then at the same time when he dressed up, he was like the perfect model. So he had this aristocrat and adventurous side to him. He oozed Hollywood movie star, and that type, no matter what ethnicity, is difficult to find. And he has this gentlemanly, he's like an old style movie star. And so I was like, please be able to read lines. He's never been in anything. So we flew him out. He left his honeymoon 2 days, after 2 days. Oopsies. Not heard the end of it. So no. Sent him out with no guarantees. And he read in a room. We were so excited. There was like 17 people in a really small room. And he gets in there, and he just flew in that morning from Singapore, and because he's from Singapore. And he's talking with Constance, and we're just warming him up. In the middle of the conversation, he's like, God, I'm so sorry, I just can't talk, I'm just so nervous. And he won us over in a second, and he was able to do lines. He was so natural. I've never seen anything like it. So, and then luckily, Warner Brothers was like, because we have to present several options for them to see who they like as well. And they were like, is there even a question? Of course that guy. There's no reason not to have that guy. It was very, very clear that he, especially when you read the book and you read that specific type, there's no one else that you could have chosen.
Also, Awkwafina owns this role. I mean, the character's funny in the book. She's hilarious in the movie. How much of that was working with her?
Well, how did you guys find Awkwafina? She was in Ocean's 8
YouTube.
before.
Yeah, she stole YouTube also. Not YouTube, the Ocean's 8 movie. She was fantastic in Ocean's 8. We had been wanting to work with her for a while. We had a great cast in Ocean's 8, but it was really the YouTube stuff where she popped. She hadn't done anything before that.
Yeah, and then when they recommended her, I remembered her, and we brought her in, and she was so out there. Like we wrote Piglet the way it was in the book, which is very different than her, and what she brought was so unique. It was like it upped every scene. It made every scene that felt earnest not earnest anymore. She would like flip it on a dime. She was like speaking the truth. She spoke what the audience is thinking, and that that kind of fire in any scene would be very valuable to us. So yeah, it was very easy for us to make that call. But we knew she was also like, she hadn't been in a lot of movies, so she was going to be her, and so I didn't want to put an accent on her. I didn't want to put accents on anybody. Who we hired was I wanted them to talk like, because I wanted them to be at their full power. I'm not trying to think of how they said something. So we just adjusted the character accordingly.
The book has these amazing descriptions of all the couture, all of the buildings that they live in, the food that they eat, things that can add up at a production budget. But it's amazing because you capture so much of it. So tell us a little bit about the approach to how you were going to bring this world to life, knowing the stakes also of that this is sort of breaking ground that hasn't been broken in over 25 years.
Their character in the movie. I mean, I think the fashion, Singapore, the food. I mean, you did an amazing job doing that.
Yeah, I mean, and much like dance and some of my other movies are, or magic and some of the movies are, or action is, the food was, and the city is definitely a character. I know that, a lot of times they say, oh, well, Asians don't have emotion. That's why they're not good actors. Like, I don't know, how are they expressing themselves? Which I think is complete bullshit. And so, what I realize is when you watch someone like Eleanor, she may not say "I love you," but when she says "I love you," at least I know my parents, it's through the food, through the way when my mom says, "Oh, you need a haircut," or "You've gained weight," she's actually saying I love you. And you see it in their eyes. When you see Eleanor, if you pass Eleanor on the street, you'd be like, wow, she's very emotionless. That is the exact opposite of Eleanor. She is giving you so much things that are other than dialogue. And I think that's and that's why it's important to have representation behind the camera and in front of the camera, because we know that the moment isn't the communication of the word, it's the moment after the word, and usually it's the opposite of what they're saying. It's the holding on that shot, it's letting, or speeding up that shot, or going to some other moment where she plays that mahjong piece. So that was our approach to sort of that idea. Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about some of the design elements, working with your costume designer to sort of bring some of this stuff to life.
We had a great team. Mary Voigt did our costumes, Nelson Coates did our production design, Vanya, who I don't think had done a feature before he did The Deuce on HBO, did our cinematography, and these people were amazing. We knew that the book had so much detail in it, and we didn't have the biggest budget in the world. We were like crazy, moderately rich Asians. So we had to be smart about how we shot it, and I don't know how many film students are out there, but and I think that's always an approach of how you're always going to have financial and time restraints. So we have to be better, smarter, more creative filmmakers to get this feeling that we want out of things that we won't necessarily have access to. We always said, I don't want to know what you can't do. I want to know what you can do, and use creativity to overcome those obstacles that are in our way. So we just had to be a little bit more surgical on when we're shooting a scene of how to get it, knowing when I got it, and the design of it was a part of that. So for instance, the wedding, that in the movie, the book, they describe this big, elaborate, like literally a $40 million wedding. We did not have $40 million, but what we found too is people with money. We're so used to people with money on Instagram, on reality shows, and even in Singapore, there's not a lot of room, so size doesn't indicate wealth. But what we found were the people who have money, it was how creative they could be with the money. So I think in Singapore, they're the only ones with a personal Starbucks in someone's home, like a franchise in their home. There's literally a ATM for exotic cars that you can buy exotic cars from. It's like the weird creativity with money. So we used that to our advantage and said, okay, in the wedding, we're going to do this water down the aisle, and we're going to have grass that's like up to here, so it looks like everyone's like just buried in this grass, and so that upped the value for us, even though we didn't have to spend all that money. Although draining that set was very annoying. Or Bernard's bachelor party that he throws, rather than a yacht in Macau, which we've all seen before, is this one to be able to say, oh, we own these cargo ships, let's do it on that and make our own pleasure island on that, was like a fun way to show wealth.
Was that like your bachelor party?
That was exactly my brother. I had it on that thing right there. I used more of his money. Is that okay?
To come full circle on that story you told about Henry and his wedding and the fact that he got called back 2 days out in his honeymoon. The same thing happened to him a couple weeks ago. After his wedding, he had to come back to promote this movie. So you guys are going to have to go on your honeymoon.
My wife is here. We have not gone on our honeymoon. So you guys are part of the honeymoon.
Well, don't be gone for too long, because I'm sure that there is a second and third installment.
Is there?
I don't want to put you on the spot. So get on my book. Let's talk a little bit about sort of what, this film is out now. From a studio standpoint, like what's the future of, first of all, taking risks on films that show new voices, new faces, that, in Hollywood and in big studio filmmaking? Are there other things that you guys are working on?
Yeah, we were just talking about it with the dean before. First off, we're thrilled to be in business with Jon. We're lucky enough to be able to have his next movie that he's directing, and he's going to be starting on next year. But we're also proud of the fact that we were talking about Kathy Yen, who's going to be directing Birds of Prey, which is the first Asian female director of any studio movie, which I think it's been too long. It's just exactly what we were talking about before, and I think that we need to continue to push. We need to allow the diversity in front and behind the camera that exists in this room and in our audiences. And I think it's the studio and my duty to make sure that that continues to happen. And we have to continue to take risks. We have to continue to do things that are bold, or else you're not going to get movies like this.
Let's open this up with some student questions. Who wants to jump in? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Dylan. I'm a sophomore in the School of Dramatic Arts. I'm a theater major, so for one, I really want to thank you for all of your hard work in creating this. It was so resonant and powerful to see people like myself reflected on the screen. But yeah,
I can tell you're a theater major, you project. You're going to have a good future.
I did actually have a question though, and this sort of goes back to when you guys were talking about marketing. When you did release the trailer, I remember there was this one instance where it was, I think Constance said something, it's like, you didn't tell me you're Prince Harry, or Prince William of Asia, and he says, I'm more like a Harry. I know that online there was definitely a lot of conversation about that, and some people sort of criticized that moment for how it relegated and kind of compared the Asian, characters in the story to like these British royalty members. And coincidentally, I just noticed that it wasn't in the film in the screening, unless I missed the part. But I was just wondering if you were willing to talk about the process of.
Yeah, that line was never in our movie. It was part of a scene, but that part of the scene got cut. They wanted to use it in the marketing. From what I understood at that moment, they're like, "Hey, we need the royal wedding's coming up. We need to how do we explain this movie to people in like one line?" And they're like, "Oh, if you were Meghan Markle and you were dating Harry and you realized, oh, he's Prince Harry, that's like a very easily understood line." So from my perspective, there was no issue. I actually didn't even hear about this. There was no issue. It was just about clarity, so that when people watch the trailer, they can understand the concept instead of us being like, oh, it's a girl who dated this guy in New York, and then he went to Singapore because he's from Singapore, and then when she went there, he's actually part of the richest family in Singapore, and then all the people there, like, hey, but you understood the Meghan Markle, and their wedding was at that time, I think at the same time, so like, oh, this is gonna be great. We're gonna hit this pop culture moment. There was no weird and intentional.
If I can just ask a little bit, something slightly different about that. Because there are so few films like this, you suddenly are in this position where, you're standing in for all the absent years of films not having these, Asian or Asian American casts. How much of that responsibility, tell us, from your standpoint as a filmmaker, you're going to get criticized for the most minute things. You're also going to get celebrated for the most minute things. How do you deal with that?
Well, when you've done a Justin Bieber movie, Justin Bieber fans are very sensitive about how you portray him, so you get used to that thing. When you do a Gem and the Holograms movie and nobody goes and sees it, you get used to some of the criticism. So
I saw that.
I enjoyed it. Whatever. It comes with the territory, I think, but this one in particular was more personal. I don't blame people for wanting this to represent all Asians everywhere. It is an unfair situation that we're in, that one movie, everything is hanging on this one movie, and we feel like it has to represent that's the problem with the representation of Asians. Everyone thinks it is just one thing, but it really is so many different countries and people coming together. And so I had to stay focused on making a great movie. Like you said, if we didn't have a great movie, then this was for nothing. But what I was blessed about is this movie does include a lot of different, because Singapore is a place where a lot of different cultures come together on an island. So I got to do a little bit of that, more than maybe other movies get to do that. I don't get angry at people for having that discussion. I think it's great to have debates and conversation. What a privilege to finally have conversations about who we can cast here and who we can cast there, instead of saying, why aren't we in that cast? So I just think it's very healthy. I think it's the beginning of a conversation. I think that this opens the door. It's one story with very particular written characters in a novel that already exists. And if it can open that door and show that this is good business, then other stories can come through, so that other stories that need to be told with better stories can be told, with better filmmakers can be told. And the more information people have, you can't unsee what you see. Once you see that Asians can be all types and all styles and all walks of life, when you see an Asian person, you see them differently. And so I think we just need to get more information to people out there of who we are in all shades and colors, and things will be looked more of like human beings.
Yes, that's it.
I love Keenan Grant. Keenan is the one who sang the wedding song, by the way.
And so having your experience with all of these music-based movies, and I just wanted to ask you to speak more on your music choices and how you chose to put the music that you did in the film.
So she's asking about the music choices for the film.
Well, fun fact, when we did that YouTube audition video, somebody who submitted did not read the script that we gave them, and instead sang a song. And a year later, luckily they kept that audition up because we used her. Cheryl Kay, are you here? I don't even know. Oh, there she is, right in the middle. If you heard the song Money, that is her voice. She's a USC, she's a Trojan. I wish I could say I hired her because she was a Trojan, but it wasn't. It was because of her big voice. That little girl has a huge voice. She sings Money in the beginning and in the end with Aquafina. So it was it was a really cool thing to have that. Part of me didn't even want subtitles. I was like, screw subtitles, just let people hang on and learn as they go. Did not get that one through. But I wanted the music to reflect what I hear around my house growing up. And some of these older songs, these sort of songs from like the 50s and 60s, Chinese songs, I had never heard. Someone had sent me a version of it, and I loved it so much. I was like, how do I not know this exists? And it was like an old Hollywood musical, sort of swing style. It was like so cool and swaggy. And so I went home and I played for, that's a Bieber word, I played it for my mom, and she knew all the words of the song. She's like, oh my gosh, we used to dance to this in China. We used to do the jitterbug to this. I could see like her young self come back, and that was shocking to me. I was like, and she's, where did you find this? I was like, this thing called Spotify. These related songs, more like this. And then we searched others, and she knew all these songs. It was such an amazing time to share with my mother. And then I used a lot of those songs in this movie, and I found my aunts know the words to it. And then I wanted to add my own spin, so we added contemporary songs, and I wanted them to be in Chinese. I've been watching a lot of Chinese covers on YouTube, and they were so good because you know the songs, and no matter what words are being said, it still has the same, like, it's about the emotion of music and how it moves you. And so we did that with a bunch of songs, and actually I didn't think we had the budget to do all those covers. So my first cut of it, I only did a little bit of what I had pitched to do. And I got notes from Warner Bros. Saying, you pitched that you were gonna do covers of songs. You should do that, double down on that. I was like, oh, we don't have the money, do we? And they're like, no, you do. So that's what we did. And I think it's actually, I think, our secret sauce. I think it's like, makes it feel very familiar, but not exactly, like unlike you've ever heard it before. That last song, Coldplay, Yellow, That was an interesting one because we put it in the movie. I loved it. Yellow has always, I've had a very complicated relationship with the word yellow, but I thought it was an empowering idea to reclaim that. And then when they talk about yellow, it's the beauty of yellow. It's the color of the stars and this woman and love. And so at first Coldplay said no. I had read, I think in an article, Greta Gerwig, to get songs for Lady Bird, wrote all these letters to Justin Timberlake. So I wrote a letter to Coldplay about my experience with the word yellow and how their song changed that for me, and how I needed that song when I had to have that song when I needed it most when I was sort of in college here. I remember seeing the music video here for the first time, and within an hour they okayed it, and so we recorded that and put it in. So it's a very powerful one. I don't know if people know what song that is or when it's happening, but that was a big choice for us.
Well, is the soundtrack going to be available? Is
Oh, it's available, yeah,
on
absolutely.
Fantastic.
That we can take care
Let's see. Yeah.
Thanks so much for being here. So it's the best version of the movie. I don't know, I read the book earlier in the summer and I thought this was amazing. And thank you for approaching the representation competition with such nuance. I feel like as a writer, filmmaker, I'm learning a lot just by following on social media and being here tonight. I wanted to ask about a change from the book also to the Astrid storyline. I really like the way that you concluded the film, and I just kind of wanted to know, how you approach truncating the story, and especially since it seems like it's more or less the only B story in this the film. How you kind of approach interweaving it with Rachel's story.
Well, the book, Kevin really screwed me with the book because he has so many storylines, and so I knew when I came in I had to be focused. And what's interesting about the book is Astrid is the most popular character in the book, and Rachel and Nick are the least favorite characters in the book. But what I related most in the book wasn't all the fancy stuff. It was Asian American going to Asia for the first time. This idea of going to your homeland and not knowing what to expect and feeling this warmth, and then having them call you Guaylo and realize, which means white devil, which, then you realize you're not part of that world either, and then you come home and you feel like you have to choose. And so I was very specific of following her, and I knew that was our guiding line, not the two of them, not four of them. It was just her finding, we always call it the growth of the dragon within her, that she would find her self-worth through this journey. And so with Astrid, we had to be very careful, and we had more of Astrid, and we had a very small version of Astrid too, and so we went back and forth trying to find the right thing. And we actually had more of Charlie, which is Harry Shum at the end there. I'm glad you guys stayed for the credits to watch that.
They freaked out.
They freaked out, of course. That's what we've been waiting for. They actually had a little scene together. But what we found was that it made Astrid weaker. It made it feel like she was leaving her husband for this guy. And it didn't have that sort of empowerment of her own will to leave on her own terms. And as soon as we lifted it, that moment where she tells Michael that she can't make him she's done trying to make him feel like a man, something that he's not. Suddenly that moment became a cheering moment for everybody instead of something dependent on somebody else. So that change was big for us. And in terms of Rachel's journey, what really helped us was, so all the scene where the dumpling making scene is not in the book, and it used to be a dinner where she goes there after the bachelor party, and and Eleanor has this big dinner, makes a big announcement, brings Nick in, and announces that he's taking over the company. And every time we'd reach this point, and it was pretty late in the game that we still had the scene, we were like, what does the young company corporation do again? And why do we care about a business? And now we're going to start talking about him taking over a company for like 4 scenes. And what we realized was that this was not had to take it out of the plottiness of this, and we had to make it emotional. And so what's stronger than that is family, and getting in between of Eleanor versus Rachel. We kept coming back to that. So we added this dumpling scene to, one, show that this family did love each other. They weren't just some family that attacked whoever the outsider was. Like, they had history together. They loved each other dearly. Eleanor was fiercely protective of Nick in this, and you can tell that in there. And Rachel appreciates it. She comes from as an only child with a single mother, so she looks around like, this is a warm room. I want this. And then, of course, at that moment when they go up the stairs, which I love, it's sort of like Jungle Book. The snake is slithering up, the little mouse is running around, and she like seduces her, wraps her around, and then touches her face and says, "You will never be enough." That made the stakes so much higher for us than Nick staying to take over a business, which never meant anything to us. And that changed the whole movie, because now it was, how are you going to break up a family for this? And to see them challenge Rachel to either step up and fight back, and not for the guy, and Peaklin says this very clearly, this is not about the guy, this is about self-respect. And so she fights back for her own self-respect, and then has to stand up to her in that way. It just strengthened our movie in ways that all the plottiness of the other stuff just never did. And it wasn't in the book, but we knew that this was the heart of our movie. This was what was going to make our movie work.
All right, let's take maybe two more. Yes. Okay. We'll go with you, and then we'll come over to you.
Okay. So I guess speaking about personal stories, Mr. Chu, earlier you kind of touched on the fervor and the passion, the excitement that's going on with this event, and it's a movement. And I guess I wanted to know, after you taking this leading role and going through on all this groundbreaking work, is there any pivotal advice or key lessons that you've learned through doing something that, quite frankly, hasn't really been done before, that you have to offer?
Yeah, I never saw it as groundbreaking work. I only knew what I wanted to see on the screen and what I wanted to tell in my own life. And I was lucky that the book had elements that I could draw from and use my family and all my experiences to put that in there. I knew that it would mean things to me, my family, and my friends. I did not expect it to mean so much to people who I've heard all around the country this week. I did not expect to feel the emotion. I did not expect to cry every 4 hours this week. It is, my advice would be to focus on the work and the authenticity of what you're trying to say. Because I feel like if you have something truthful to say, what I've discovered is you're most likely not alone. We feel alone. We feel out of place. We feel like we're all trying to find a way. What are we going to do? How are we going to do it? Where do we belong? What's our purpose? But everybody feels that way, and in that we're united. And what you find is if you can be as truthful to what you're trying to say, not trying to make a movie that looks like something else that you've seen. Because when I came to film school, that was like your mentality. If it can look like a big movie, then I made a big movie. Those are the most hollow movies. It's actually, where does it come from the inside out? Then I guarantee you, even if you don't have a fervor like this, which was unexpected, you will touch some people very strongly, and that's the power of movies.
Kevin, for the Marshall alumni out there, tell us a little bit about same question, some advice. When you're in a position where you have the role to be someone who sort of creates and stimulates culture, what are some of the things that you would suggest?
It's funny because today is such a weird day for me. We're opening our movie, and my wife and I moved our son into Burncrant today. And so I've been doing a lot of what you've been doing, which is crying a lot. and reflecting on, what do I want my son to do kind of in this next chapter? Because it truly is. I think what's making it emotional for me is I feel like I've turned the page and I'm entered into another chapter of my life and his life. And so as I was thinking about this today, and I was telling John, I was taking pictures of him walking away from me. And
No, literally, he has 30 pictures. That's an animation.
and I think that what you want is to dream and to do the things and to try the things that you want to do in life. And because you talked about your mom. My mom just turned 91 years old, and she didn't dance the jitterbug in China, but she's a very proud Asian mother. But the thing that my parents did for me, and I was the youngest of 5 also, is I think while my father who's not alive, would kind of think to himself, there's no way I could be in the position that I'm in, given where he was at and what he had experienced in his life. But they instilled in me the possibility of doing anything. And I think that that's what I would tell anyone, is that you only set your own limits in life. I think that it's up to you to kind of push through, and it is hard. And you're in the insecurities that you talked about exist in every one of us. Some of us hide it better, others don't. But I think it's really, we put our own limits upon ourselves, and I think it's incumbent upon ourselves to kind of push through it and dream big.
All right, bring it home.
Hi, I've been a really big fan. We've been following your career for years, so this is really cool for me. I just want to know, in the retrospect of advice for young Asian American filmmakers, based on your experience and like your peers, what would you say would be you've recognized the biggest differences between working with big studios and traditional films versus like your peers like Wong Fu who work on online spaces?
Well, I have a little different perspective only because I was very lucky to get into studio movies right when I came out of college. So I've only done studio, I've never done independent movies. But I've done a lot of YouTube stuff. I have a dance crew. And we've done a lot of online stuff. So, yeah. It's very similar. You never feel like you have enough time. You never feel like you have enough resources. The best movies I've made is where I feel the panic as if I'm doing it myself. And some of the movies that got away with me where I felt like, oh my gosh, this is so big that other people are doing everything. So I love doing both because it keeps your mind sharp, and again, you have to be as creative you have to be as creative and a storyteller to pitch a story as it is to actually make the movie. You have to be as much of a storyteller to talk to all your department heads, to communicate to them what you want in the story. You have to empower them to be storytellers, not just dress people, not just decorate things, but you have to communicate what you're trying to say in each of these scenes. And so, to me, that importance of communication and being a storyteller in all parts of your life is so important to get what you want in the end, because it all filters, it all gets in their head, and they will bring things to the table that you couldn't have thought of yourself. And so it's actually very much more similar than you would think. Although sometimes when I get I get cornered, I can always call this guy and be like, can I get that extra day? And I don't think Wong Fu can do that necessarily.
Before we say goodnight to you guys, we wanted to take a group picture where you're sort of standing in front and everyone is in the audience behind you.
Everyone's really excited for this picture.
But before we do that, let's properly thank you for joining us tonight. I can't wait for the next shoot. And I can't wait to see the next project. Bring it on.
First, Alex gets the big for the profile. You guys gotta be wild and crazy, okay? Exactly. All right, ready, guys?